Welcome to video number 3 for our nuclear power lecture series. This is all about utilization, or how we currently use nuclear power in the United States and the world, and a bit about the history, the troubled history of nuclear. All right, so let's start by talking about nuclear power in the world. So in 2018, we generated 2,563 terawatt hours of energy using nuclear power, which is just some nonsensical number, right? To give you an idea, that's 10% of global energy met with nuclear. Okay, it's actually the second, only behind hydro, for low carbon energy sources. That's in the US. In the world, I think it might have overtaken hydro. Those are kind of competing with each other. Okay, there are 443 reactors in the world at 395 gigawatts of power. So it's actually kind of a small number, right? And you'll notice the number of reactors in the gigawatts is about on par. That's because most reactors are about the size of 1 gigawatt. You also have multiple reactors at one facility, so the number of facilities is even smaller than that. Okay, in the United States, I'm sorry I misspoke earlier, nuclear is much larger than hydro in the United States, as you can see here in this plot. This is somewhat old data, but you see nuclear started, 60s, that was experimental. In 1970 is really when it took off, and we had rapid growth in nuclear power all the way until 1978, and then we'll talk about what happened then. Most of this growth is just due to adding more reactors to existing sites, and then it has been almost constant ever since then. There was going to be a nuclear renaissance in 2010, but then in 2011 something else happened, and so we're talking about how poorly timed nuclear disasters really have not done good things to this industry. Okay, but in the United States, we have 98 reactors, and 65% of those are pressurized water reactors, PWRs. We talked about those in the last lecture. As you can see, about 20% of our electricity comes from nuclear. We are running into a problem, though, in that our nuclear fleet, built way back here, is starting to get too old. All right, so let's talk briefly about the history of nuclear power, right? So, okay, whoops. Like I mentioned, most reactors in the US were built in the 1970s. But then, in 1978, a reactor at 3 Mile Island, a plant in Pennsylvania, had an accident, the 3 Mile Island accident. This was due to a coolant leak. So, as you can imagine, if the fluid that is flowing to the reactor springs a leak, a massive leak, then it is unable to cool the reactor sufficiently, and the reactor starts to increase in temperature. And in theory, they call it the China problem. A reactor could get so hot and maintain that heat for so long, it could just burn its way all the way through, all the way to China. And so this, in 1978, is when it happened. And so the U.S. lost confidence. This event was publicized throughout the world, mainly because there was a bit of a cover-up, as people tried to say it wasn't as bad as it was. Now, there were no deaths. It really was mainly the issue of technology with some human error. But then the real famous one, of course, is Chernobyl in Ukraine. This was due almost entirely to human error, both because it was a very poorly designed plant with the inability to control the reaction the way it should. Meaning, so here with the coolant leak, that was kind of a repair issue. But here was human error because the plant just was not designed well, and the reaction ran out of control and started to just have this chain reaction, essentially a small nuclear explosion inside the reactor. This was extremely well publicized, and the world lost confidence. This is when a lot of environmental groups started to protest nuclear as a sustainable, clean energy source. Especially the issue of waste has really riled the debate. What do we do with nuclear waste? What do we do about the plutonium that you could use to create a bomb? So nuclear is a major point of debate. However, something really, really important that we just can't forget is that nuclear is a low carbon source of power. Very low carbon. And it has a lot of advantages that renewable energy does not have. It's not necessarily dispatchable in that you can turn it on and off whenever you want, but it is always on, so it's constant. Contrast this with any renewable source, aside from geothermal, and you find that you just can't beat a nuclear power plant when it comes to a constant power source, or we could even say its capacity factor is just amazing. So I really do think that nuclear does need to play a part in our future. If we want to have a just and relatively easy transition to non-carbon fuel sources, I think nuclear will have to be a part of that, even as an intermediate step to full renewables. And just so you know, right now, most nuclear in the world is in France, actually. Believe it or not, powers 80% of its country using nuclear power. The USA, obviously, at 20% of its large power load is a big contributor to the total amount of nuclear power. And then Japan, we didn't even talk about the Japanese incident in 2011. After a tsunami, a Japanese reactor was flooded with seawater, and it went into thermal runaway as well. And this, of course, came at the inopportune time when the government was just about to fund more nuclear power, and then Fukushima happened, and we didn't see that increase in nuclear. So these poorly timed incidents have made it very hard for nuclear to catch on and have a positive view in the public's eye. Okay, that's it for nuclear power. Thanks for watching.